Welcome to the Back to Me podcast, where we help multicultural incoming freshman women and men manage their entire college experience throughout post-graduation to successfully transition into entrepreneurship and corporate workspaces as new hires.
Back to me. Oh, I turned it around. I'm back to me. I finally figured it out. I'm back to me. So when you think you have nothing, back to me. I go back to me. Yeah, I'm back to me.
Hello, everyone. It's your host, Yoli Tamu. The next generation of educators are needed now more than ever. In this week's episode of our third annual Divine Nine series, How Sororities and Fraternities Support Mental Health Awareness, we are joined by Dr. Theo Fowles, Manager of Teacher Residency at Partnerships for Los Angeles Schools, and Spring 2003 Initiate Nu Epsilon chapter member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. In addition to being the Western Region Director of Education for his fraternity, Dr. Fowles encourages young professionals to take care of themselves and make an impact in their communities by developing a strong skill set in the teaching profession while maintaining a willingness to learn. Enjoy. We are in our third annual Divine Nine series, and today we have Dr. Theo Fowles, the Spring 2003 Initiate Nu Epsilon chapter member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, with us. How you doing, Dr. Theo? How's it going?
I'm excited to be here, and it's good to be back.
Yes, back from where? What were you doing?
Well, I mean, go listen to
back on the
episode
podcast?
56. Back on the podcast. I'm back, baby. I'm back.
I love it. I'm so glad to have you back. You know, you're one of our powerful guests, just your heart. You know, I really appreciate your heart. And thank you for making yourself available to us.
Of course, anytime.
All right. So as I said, we're in this Divine Nine series, and you have changed some things around. You've moved around a little bit since the last time we spoke. Looks like now you're the manager of teacher residency at Partnership for LA. You tell us about that?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm the manager of teacher residency for the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools. We're a nonprofit organization with a collective of 20 schools within the Los Angeles Unified School District. For those that don't know, LAUSD is the second largest school district in the country. Our schools that we partner with are located within Watts, Boyle Heights, and South LA. And we work with those schools to provide amazing resources, benefits to our students and teachers in those schools. And my job is to bring new teachers to the profession by way of our teacher residency program. So our residents are not only matched one-to-one with a teacher that has had at least 3 to 4 years of experience, but they're also in a year of training where they get their master's in teaching credential at the same time. So we're building a pipeline of folks that are interested and prepared for the teaching profession. We all know a teacher that has impacted our life and made us into the person that we are. And so we're looking to fill that pipeline with more amazing folks in 2023 and beyond to fill those shoes. So excited to do that for the community.
That's so powerful. And, you know, we need that. I mean, right now, education is in trouble. So for you to be working with some young professionals to bring some fresh energy is pretty powerful. So I was going to ask you what inspired you to do that, because you have a certain expectation about education or a feeling about where we should go. What inspired you to make this pivot?
Well, I think about my overarching career path so far, right? I found an interest in taking people from not knowing something to knowing something, right? I love being on podcasts. I have my own podcast as well. It all is situated around taking people from not knowing something to knowing something. And so I think for me, you know, I started off in the classroom myself as a high school teacher, right? And I remember, you know, the things that I didn't know about the profession when I jumped into the pool, right? And the things that I learned right away, right? So, you know, oftentimes people are amazed at the calm that I have in high pressure situations. I was like, have you ever been a teacher before? Right? Or the way that I can easily facilitate a meeting or pivot or even think on my feet, right? Have you ever had a lesson plan go wrong right? And so these are things that you learn in the classroom that translate to other professions and other industries and other spaces. But I give that to education as a grounding space for me. And so when the opportunity came up for me to then prepare the next generation of teachers, because that's what we're doing, right? It was a no-brainer for me to make that happen.
That's great. And so are you finding that the students that are coming in, the young professionals, they have that energy, they're ready to see change happen? Because we're in a new generation. So how different is the conversation with the young professionals?
Well, I think that there's a couple of different areas that I've noticed so far. I've been in this role, at the time of this recording, I've been in the role since February of 2023, right? And so the two buckets I see so far are the bucket of folks coming from, recent graduates, and they're coming from, getting that college degree and into the working world for the first time, right? They still have that sense of the need for social justice, the need to make impact, the need to be involved in the community. And I think that energy is going to sustain you for a little while, within the teaching profession. But you need to have that skill set along with it to help sustain you over a longer period of time. So we kind of capture their energy and give them tools around how to actually be effective. And the other bucket I see are the folks that are already at a school site, right? Your teachers' aides, your paraprofessionals, your assistants, those folks that have been in a school community, they have students that know their names and play not the role of teacher at the current moment, but they're looking to level up their skill set, right? And so, yeah, we definitely have a group of folks that have been, in those roles for a long time and looking to level up. So that's a different conversation, right? How is your role in that school going to change based off of the title of teacher versus assistant, right? Or these other things, right? And in both cases, I see sometimes a sense of imposter syndrome there. Am I ready? Right? Those type of questions. But mostly I find that the folks that are interested in the education space, they are doing it because at the end of the day, they want to see change and difference, and that's their motivator, right? Lots of folks, in 2023, especially if you're talking to a recent grad, they might be looking at, finances and other things, right? Where education is not that sexy gold coin that's going to get you there, right? Not immediately, right? Because there's ways of making money within education, right? But you also have to understand the system in order to be able to thrive in the system. And so I think that, those are the kind of things that I see from both kind of buckets.
Yeah, that's really important what you're saying about this is not the profession for the prosperous one seeking a major payoff. I mean, it does pay off in its own way for sure, emotionally. But yeah, when we talk about tangible finances, it's just not that first profession you think of. So when I talk about that young professional, because you and I talked before about, this whole generation of immediacy, they want it right now. So I think with that attitude, it makes you wonder if, they're just going to be around for a short time because they're excited today. But when they get in the thick of it, what's going to happen then?
Right. Well, I think that there's a couple of ways to look at that, right? I think that teaching is one of the most immediate types of professions that you can have, right? If you go into a kindergarten classroom today, right, at the end of the week, you'll have different results. That kid will have learned something, or they have had a new experience, and their outlook is going to be different from Monday to Friday, right? The results are immediate in terms of that, right? What you don't see in education, right, and this is why organizations like the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools exist, is the immediacy and the quickness in terms of the systems and the structures around education, right? In order to make change in an organization as big as LAUSD, right, it takes a long time, right? You might not see that suggestion or that change within that academic year, right? And that's the part that for new folks to the space, they could get some frustration around. But I think that if you're a new professional in education listening to this podcast, I would say, your school is your home base, but it's not your only base, right? Like in terms of learning about new ways to teach, new ways to learn. There's conferences, right? So there's spaces where you're going to be able to feel some impact in that system space as well, but it just might not be the home base, right? And again, look at the United States right now, and nobody is in agreement around what should be taught, who should be teaching, all these different types of things. So the industry is getting a lot of conversation right now. It's more of the what's next type of conversation, right? Because the curriculum in California is different than the curriculum in Illinois, is different than the curriculum in Texas, and that other state that shall not be named. We all know the one I'm talking about, right? So yeah, so I think that there's some different aspects to education that people often don't think about, and I'm just here to play a small part in a piece of that experience.
Well, I'm glad you're here because I know, me being in the district myself, as you know, 20 plus years, what's held me is what you initially said, your desire to see change. You can make an impact. So for that professional that's listening, hopefully they'll hold on to that desire will carry them through. Okay. So now for our Divine Nine series, we are focusing on mental health. And we always want to know how, our swords and our frats are taking care of themselves. So I wanted to ask you first, how are you taking care of yourself this month or in every day?
Well, I mean, I think for me, I have a little bit of a system. I think keeping a schedule helps with mental health. So I know, for myself, I have, my work hours, right? So I know what those kind of entail. I also have specific days on Tuesday and Wednesdays where I'm doing things related to my business or to consulting or things, right? I try to keep those to those days. And then I tend to try to plot out some of my time. So it didn't come naturally at first, but now I make sure to listen to an audio book or play a video game or listen to music, at night, right? Since I'm a night owl, I tend to do those things that bring me joy and kind of give me ease, at night to kind of wrap the day. And I think that those kind of consistencies really help with mental health. And then I also think, being definitive in the types of folks that you have around you, right? I'm a Pisces, right? Shout out to the Pisces, but I feed off of people's energy for sure. And so if you're in a bad mood, I don't need to talk to you this week, right? Like come at me when you got some good energy to spend, right? But I mean, if you are in a bad room, because it's always like check on your strong friends, right? So if there's a friend in need, that can definitely reach out. But I like to not necessarily be prepared for those conversations, but I just want to be able to sift and sort the energy I want to take in at any given point in time. So
Yeah, that's important. I mean, energy is real. That's important. You can definitely feel energy from other people. You could be in a great mood and all of a sudden you're down and you don't know why. It's because of the atmosphere. That's a real thing. I love what you said about at night, audibles. So what do you do anything in the morning? Do you have like a wake up routine of any kind?
Oh, wake up routine. I definitely have a playlist that goes on as soon as I hit the water and soap. You got specific songs that are always some mantras, right? I look fly, I look good, right? Touch my swag, wish I could, right? Like so for me, like I think it's small things like that where, as you build them in, you might not even think of it as something that is helping you with your mental health. But as you take that thing away, you're like, oh, something's off today, right? So if you're a plant parent, right, and you didn't water, you didn't touch your plants. I don't know how plant life goes because I'm not a plant parent, but people have their things, right? So be willing and able to find out what your thing is and make sure you make space for it, right? So if that's painting, if that's reading, if that's listening to books, if that's hanging out with a friend, if that's not talking to nobody and being in the corner, like you have to be able to do that. And if you don't do those things, then that buildup of something being off leads to those other issues that then you have to fix later on, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you calendar your workouts and your time for yourself to have fun?
I don't necessarily calendar it out, but I'm aware, right? And I think that that's the other thing is like, some people work by calendar. I don't necessarily have to do that, but I just know that I need to have space for those things, right? So, if I'm at my computer all day, right, I just know that 15 minutes just away from the screen, and in that 15 minutes, I might listen to audio, right? Or I might listen to some music, right? So things that are going to bring me back to the space I want to be in.
That's good. That's good to hear. So you go based on the way you feel, you know? And that's important that you're tuned in, self-awareness, you're tuned in.
Yep. Knowing it's half the battle.
That is half the battle to check in with yourself. So now, as a Phi Beta Sigma fraternity member, you're also the Western Region Director of Education. Is that the correct title?
That is, that
Wow.
is.
You do so much. So, how has the fraternity or being a member of the fraternity served you in your life thus far?
So I actually just turned 20 years old in Sigma. So for some, that's a short amount of time, right? But for others, in 2023, for the new initiates, they might call me an old head. Who knows? But I would say that being a part of Phi Beta Sigma specifically has given me some of my closest friends. Shout out to both members of Phi Beta Sigma and Zeta Phi Beta. Got to shout out my sorors because the only Divine Nine organization that has a constitutionally bound brotherhood and sisterhood. We wrote it down on paper. I always bring that up because, historically, you got to think about our organization was founded in 1914, our sister organization founded in 1920. And in 1920, it takes a special type of organization and individual to think about Black women and making space for them. And so I think for our organization to do that intentionally was a really important thing and something that drove me to even choose Phi Beta Sigma as the fraternity of choice, right? So, I've gotten mentors from the organization. And as you mentioned, I'm currently the director of education for the Western region. And so in that role, I'm able to expand upon my love of the education space, right? So far this year, we've given over $10,000 in scholarships, in our region. We've worked with undergraduate students. We've worked with alumni brothers that are looking to go back to school or, finishing, higher level degrees, right? And being able to mentor and shape people as they go through their education process. And I think that has been really helpful for me. And I would say the last thing too that I really appreciate is that everything that I do in my day job, right, I've already done in some way, shape, or form through my fraternity, right? And so we talk about, creating spaces where you have to develop leaders, right? Well, if I can be a leader over a region, I can be an executive at an organization, right? If I can plan out programs and events, for brothers, I can plan out programs and events for communities, right? And so it took me a little bit of time. Those are some of the things I didn't see right when I joined, right? But when you're in the organization, you're allowed to reflect a little bit. Those are some of the things that I see, right? But, when you join when you're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, I definitely was excited to go to the parties, to be able to connect, right? To be able to see, no matter where I went from coast to coast, at the end of the day, all of these individuals made this same choice, and we have something in common in our motto of culture for service and service for humanity. So,
Wow, so good. So you have been paying it forward for over 20 years.
oh man, it sounds long.
I love it. 20 years. That's great. So do you all instill that in the young initiates to reach for that goal, to be paying it forward 20, 30 years from now?
Well, I mean, I think when you say that, when you join, especially a Divine Nine organization, and you say that it's a lifelong commitment, right? You get that when you're young, but you don't have the experience to tell you that much, right? And one of the things I do like about all of our organizations, when I'm thinking about the Black community, especially, I think it's one of the few places where you'll see some reflection from the elders, right? So, when I go to a chapter meeting, I'm sitting down next to a brother that came in 1989 or 1979 or 69 or whatever the year might be. And it's multi-generational, right? There's not that many multi-generational spaces where the structure is such that you give deference to someone that's older, and you make space to listen to them, right? Like if you think about the attention span of someone coming into an organization right now, they're swiping. They have an attention span between 8 and 11 seconds, but they come into a framework like Sigma or Zeta or any of our D9 orgs, they learn a structure where you extend your attention span. You learn to listen to something that is older than you, and you look to strive for something that's bigger than you as well, right? So I think that's something that is interesting for sure.
Yeah, that is interesting. I never thought about that in the Divine Nine, particularly in sororities and fraternities. That's where the generations do cross. They have that opportunity. That's very interesting. Didn't think about that.
I mean, they cross, and this is something that we're all trying to figure out as well, right? All our organizations, except for one at this point, is over 100 years old in terms of longevity, right? And the impact in these circles. And so, we're still trying to figure out, like, how do we keep young people interested, right? Because everybody thinks that they used to be the young person and they know, right? But things are different. But it's the same in education, right? The joke that worked well with a student last year, oh, miss, that's old, right?
Mhm.
So you have to be constantly able to listen across generations and stay engaged. So again, learning from teaching, right? Being relevant is important.
Mm. Well, you're a powerful example. So if they can pay it forward 20 years from now, they're doing good. They're doing good. So now we love to wrap up with final words of encouragement for that young listener. And I mean, we even have adults, everybody's listening at this point, parents and such. But for that young person that's just seeking to possibly enter the profession of education, do you have some words of advice?
Well, I think that entering education as a space is interesting, right? There's lots going on in our industry. There's space for you to become technologically proficient, right? To make impact in classrooms. If you are looking to be a classroom teacher, I would say that you should go into any classroom, one, with determination to stick to it. Go into a classroom with flexibility and willingness to learn, because even a teacher at 20 years doesn't know everything and shouldn't know everything, right? Education is one of those spaces where you need to be knowledgeable at all times, right? That math that you learn might change. You might have to learn new math, right? And so you have to be able to be willing to adjust. But the last thing I would say is that if and when you go into the education space, know that you are valuable. Your check may not look as though you are valued as much as you think you need to be. And those are things that are going to be systematic and not change. But I think that most importantly, if you're going to be a teacher or an educator, you're needed. Students spend more time with teachers than they do with parents at times. And so if you're willing to be in that role, helping to take people from not knowing something to knowing, then know that you are ultimately providing the society overall a great service, and those students will remember you. And I think that that's key, right? So be worth remembering, be great at your job, get to know what you need to know, get the degree that's going to give you the skills to do what you need to do. And if ever you are in Los Angeles and looking to teach in Watts, South LA, or Boyle Heights, come holler at me and we'll get you set up. So that's what I would say.
That's fantastic. Oh, my goodness. Thank you for saying that. So if they wanted to reach you, where would they go? IG or LinkedIn? Where would you like to send them?
If you're interested in teaching, contact me at my day gig, right? So theo.fowles at partnershipla.org. And that's where you can find me. Outside of work, I would suggest heading over to my podcast page, which is at Black Social Cap on all platforms. But it's the Black Social Capital Podcast. and we do similar interviews, and we would like to connect with you there.
I love it. Yes. Tell us one more time about the Black Social Capital podcast. Where's that title come from?
Yeah, the podcast itself is a shout out to how I came up and how I learned to be in the space that I am just by learning from other Black professionals. So we interview Black professionals, asking them how they got to and through the spaces that they're currently in or where they're headed next. And we are entering season 4 as of August 2023. So look out for new episodes in August, and we'll be going back to our every other week structure. So you'll find us on Spotify as well as some of our video episodes on YouTube as well.
Very cool. Congratulations on a new season. Good for you. My goodness.
Thank you.
Hey, and thank you for helping me in this space. We're all growing, trying to make a difference.
Let's make it happen.
Yes. All right. Well, Dr. Theo, I appreciate you. Thank you for being with us, visiting us again.
That's right. Go back and visit that episode 56. That was a banger.
That's right. That's right. You remember the number. I love it. Thank you. All right. Well, you have a good weekend. I will be in touch with you very soon.
All right. Have a good one, everyone. And go mob to my frat.
All right. Take care. Bye. Thank you for joining us. As you consider making a major impact in the classroom, focus on the value you can bring to every individual you touch. For more information about other episodes, remember to subscribe to the Back to Me podcast, College and Beyond. I'm your host, Yoli Tamu. Leave a review at the end of this podcast, and if you would like to learn more about other special events, join the Back to Me podcast Facebook group, or simply text Back to Me to 833-206-4565. Until next time, be well.
Back to